Here's an interesting study. The most conservative Republicans express the lowest levels of speech complexity, according to a new study by the Sunlight Foundation. Are you surprised by this, Lewis?
Not at all.
The study found that the more conservative a Republican was, the lower his or her speech level tended to be. But the same is also partially true for lawmakers on the Democratic side, right? The more progressive Democrats also tend to speak at a lower grade level. However, the decline in speech complexity is far less pronounced for Democrats than for Republicans. This is pretty interesting stuff. This was, of course, measured with the Flesch-Kincaid test, which is a known measure of speech complexity, isn't it, Natan?
Yeah, but what is your conclusion? Because I don't think I have the same opinion.
Okay, so I have a nuanced conclusion here, and the fact that I have a nuanced conclusion is part of the conclusion itself, as a matter of fact. So if we look at this, the idea would be that lower grade level speech indicates less intelligent speech. I actually tend to reject that. I think it's particularly because Flesch-Kincaid equates higher grade levels with longer words and longer sentences. It doesn't take into consideration whether the sentence is factually true, the sentence structure, vocabulary, or coherence. It doesn't. But when I make an analysis of this, I think there's a twofold thing here. Now, there is a partisan story here, Lewis, okay, which is Democrats versus Republicans. The real story overall is the trend towards anti-intellectualism and the connotation that nuance is bad, as we saw very glaringly with John Kerry on the I voted for it before I voted against it thing. That was a nuanced thing, and it was, it's a flip-flop. At first glance, I don't understand the nuance, so it's a flip-flop. Here's my thought on this. Progressives understand that complex concepts need to be phrased so that everybody can understand them. It's sometimes considered condescending by some, but I think progressives are doing a good job of being aware that the reality is nuance, and you need to boil it down. And the more progressive one is, the more they know they need to boil down that nuance. What I see happening on the Republican side is different. It's that if something is nuanced, by definition, God hates it, and it's an Islamo-commie fascist type of thing. So we actually need to revere ideas that are simple. So I think we're ending up with simple speech at both sides of the political spectrum, but for very different reasons. What was your thought, Natan?
Yeah, I agree. In other words, what you're saying is to express extremist ideas, it requires less complex speech and simple-minded speech.
Right.
It could also be true that people who become extremists on both sides tend to speak this way and think this way, and therefore that makes them more likely to adopt these positions, but that's not been proven from this study, obviously. But that's just my intuition.
And again, these are just interpretations. Yeah, go ahead,
Right. If this is what's happening, are you assuming that this is intentional, or this is happening kind of subconsciously by the people who are trying to express these ideas?
I think on the progressive side, there is an understanding that nuance is perceived as negative. So let's boil down our arguments as simply as possible. The more progressive the idea is, the more succinct it needs to be.
I think it's the exact opposite of what Lewis implied. I think the right has speechwriters that write these speeches and public appearances by these politicians in such a way that it'll be simple, clear to understand, short, snappy sentences with punchlines and whatnot. So I think that it's definitely, the audience is taken into account and the speeches are designed for them.
We also know that the far right, not just in terms of speech complexity, are the ones who take advantage of and are usually the best at just manipulating speech in general, using certain words and certain
tax relief,
phrases to
pro-life.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
no
to
question about it.
mislead and yeah.